One star died broke and forgotten, while another spent years unable to escape his own shadow. And you know what's even crazier? Happy Days was almost never made, but once it hit screens in 1974, it ran for 11 seasons and turned a small group of actors into American legends. But with that kind of fame came pressure, heartbreaks, and tragedy that some of these stars simply couldn't survive. So here's where it all started for the faces you all know and what really happened to them over the past 52 years. Before the leather jackets and the jukebox, there was Joni. Erin Moran joined Happy Days at just 13 years old, playing Richie's little sister. She was the little sister of an entire generation. Sweet, funny, full of heart, audiences watched her grow up across all 11 seasons. But this was just the start of a story that would become one of the saddest in television history. Because when Happy Days ended in 1984, Erin struggled to find work. The roles dried up. She made guest appearances on Murder, She Wrote and Diagnosis Murder, but nothing stuck. In 2008, she appeared on VH1's Celebrity Fit Club not as a triumphant comeback, but as a reminder of how far the spotlight had faded. But there's more, because behind the scenes, things were falling apart in ways the public didn't know about. In 2010, her California home was foreclosed on. She and her husband moved to Indiana, living a quiet and increasingly difficult life. Her co-star Anson Williams later revealed she had been secretly battling stage 4 throat cancer and that she had been texting him positive messages right until the end, not wanting anyone to worry about her. Erin Moran passed away on the 22nd of April 2017. She was just 56 years old. Joni Cunningham was America's little sister. Erin Moran deserved so much more than the ending she got, and the fact that so few people knew how much she was struggling makes it all the more heartbreaking. But while Erin Moran's story ended in heartbreak, Pat Morita's started in something even harder, because before he ever made anyone laugh at Arnold's Drive-In, he survived a Japanese internment camp as a child who'd barely learned to walk. If you watched Happy Days in the 1970s, you knew Arnold's Drive-In, and you knew the man behind the counter. Pat Morita played Matsuo Arnold Takahashi, the lovable owner of the gang's favorite hangout. He was warm, funny, and always had the right thing to say. He left after season 3 to star in his own show, making history as the first Japanese-American actor to lead a primetime TV series. But you know what's even crazier? Pat Morita's path to that counter was unlike anything Hollywood had ever seen. As a child, he suffered from spinal tuberculosis so severe that he was hospitalized and immobilized for years. By the time he recovered, World War II was underway and he and his family were sent to an internment camp. A boy who had barely learned to walk was now behind barbed wire, simply because of his heritage. He came out the other side and turned his pain into comedy, into art, into one of the most beloved characters in TV history, not just Arnold, but Mr. Miyagi in The Karate Kid, a role that earned him an Oscar nomination in 1985 and cemented his legacy forever. Pat Morita passed away on the 24th of November 2005 from kidney failure. He was 73 years old. Arnold Takahashi always had a warm smile and an open door. Pat Morita spent his entire life fighting to be seen and left behind a legacy that finally showed the world what he was truly capable of. But while Erin Moran and Pat Morita's stories ended in loss, Marian Ross walked a completely different path. She didn't get her real break until she was 46 years old, and then spent the next 5 decades proving that the best stories don't always start on time. She was the mom everyone wished they had. Marion Ross played Marion Cunningham warm, slightly dotty, unconditionally loving for the entire 1-season run of Happy Days. And here's something most people don't know. Marion Ross didn't get her big break until she was 46 years old. Before Happy Days, she'd spent decades in small parts and supporting roles, waiting for her moment. And when it came, she grabbed it with both hands. 2 Emmy nominations, a Golden Globe nomination, beloved by an entire generation of viewers who grew up calling her Mrs. C. But there's more, because after Happy Days ended, Marion didn't slow down. She appeared in Gilmore Girls, did voice work on Family Guy and King of the Hill, and starred in the CBS sitcom Brooklyn Bridge. In her 70s, 80s, and into her 90s, She kept working and kept showing up. In 2026, Marion Ross is 97 years old, still remembered with pure warmth by everyone who grew up watching her. Marion Cunningham was the heart of the Cunningham family. Marion Ross turned out to be the heart of the entire cast, the one who outlasted almost everyone, and proved that the best stories don't always end when the cameras turn off. But while Marion Ross built something lasting, Scott Baio had the opposite journey, because he arrived on Happy Days at 16 as the teen idol everyone rooted for, and ended up in a very public feud with his own former castmates decades later. When Scott Baio arrived on Happy Days in 1977 as Fonzie's younger cousin Chachi, teenage girls across America lost their minds. He was young, charming, and had a smile that could stop traffic. Chachi became so popular that he and Erin Moran got their own spin-off Joni Loves Chachi in 1982. After Happy Days, Baio kept the momentum going with Charles in Charge, playing another beloved TV teen. For a while, it looked like his career was on an upward trajectory with no ceiling. But here's where it gets really interesting, because Scott Baio's post-Happy Days story became less about acting and more about controversy. He became one of Hollywood's most outspoken conservative voices, publicly supporting Donald Trump and finding himself at odds with former castmates like Ron Howard and Henry Winkler. The feuds played out on social media, Chachi arguing with Fonzie on Twitter. Nobody could have written that in 1979. In 2026, Scott Baio is 65 years old. He appeared in the 2025 action comedy A Line of Fire, but remains a divisive figure beloved by fans of a certain era, controversial in almost every other context. Chachi Arcola was the cool kid everyone rooted for. Scott Baio turned out to be far more complicated than anyone watching Happy Days in 1977 could have imagined. But while Scott Baio became defined by Happy Days in complicated ways, Ron Howard did the exact opposite. He walked off the set mid-fame to sit behind a camera with no guarantee it would work, and ended up winning the Academy Award for Best Director. Richie Cunningham was the all-American boy. Honest, earnest, a little square, and completely lovable. Ron Howard played him for 7 seasons, leaving in 1980 to pursue directing. At the time, it was a gamble, walking away from one of the biggest shows on television to sit behind a camera with no guarantee it would work. But you know what's even crazier? It worked beyond anyone's wildest imagination. Ron Howard became one of the greatest directors in Hollywood history, Apollo 13, A Beautiful Mind, which won him the Academy Award for Best Director in 2002. 8 different actors have won Oscars under his direction. The kid from Arnold's Drive-In became one of the most powerful figures in the film industry. But there is more, because Ron Howard never forgot where he came from. In April 2025, Howard, Winkler, Anson Williams, and Don Most appeared together at the Steel City Con in Pittsburgh, their first public reunion in 50 years. It feels like 50 minutes, Winkler told the audience. In 2026, Ron Howard is 72 years old, still directing, still producing, still one of the most respected names in the industry. Richie Cunningham just wanted to fit in and do the right thing. Ron Howard took that same quiet determination and used it to conquer Hollywood completely. But the greatest story of all belongs to Henry Winkler. Because Fonzie was supposed to be a minor character, the network wanted him to stay a stereotype, and then Henry Winkler turned him into the most iconic figure on American television and spent the next 44 years proving he was so much more. There has never been a TV character quite like Fonzie. The leather jacket, the thumbs up, the single touch of the jukebox. Henry Winkler created one of the most iconic figures in television history, a greaser with a Yale MFA who became the coolest man on screen. But here's where it gets really interesting, because Fonzie was originally a minor character. Henry Winkler's performance turned him into the star of the entire show. The network wanted him to lean into the stereotype. He refused. He fought to give Fonzie depth, vulnerability, and heart. But suddenly, something happened after Happy Days ended because Winkler couldn't get work. The role that made him famous had also locked him in a box Hollywood couldn't see past. For years, he struggled. He took small parts. He kept showing up without complaint. But this was just the start of one of the greatest second acts in entertainment history. He became a beloved character actor in Arrested Development and Parks and Recreation. And then in 2018, 44 years after Happy Days began, he won the Emmy Award for his role in Barry, his first Emmy ever. In 2026, Henry Winkler is 80 years old, still acting, still writing children's books, still showing up for his castmates and his fans. Fonzie was the coolest man in Milwaukee. Henry Winkler turned out to be something even rarer, a genuinely good man who never let fame, failure, or time change who he was. Happy Days was never supposed to be deep. It was a warm, nostalgic escape, sock hops, drive-ins, and a jukebox that played on command. Critics never took it seriously, but 60 million people watched it every week for 11 years. Behind those numbers were real people dealing with illness, broken dreams, addiction, and the weight of being remembered forever as someone they played in their 20s. Some of them thrived, some never recovered, and one of them died quietly in Indiana, her struggle hidden from the world until it was too late. But the ones who are still here carry all of it with them, the joy and the grief, the leather jackets and the loss. There is only one original Happy Days, and now you know what it really cost the people who made it.